November 1990. Prison Maidstone, Kent. Ronnie Cook walks through the prison gates on day release, just weeks away from completing a 16-year sentence for armed robbery. He heads to East London, to the home of Linda Calvey, the woman he loves, the notorious Black Widow of the London underworld. He doesn't know two men are waiting for him there. One is Brian Thorogood, his supposed friend. The other is Daniel Reece, a feared Gangland enforcer and armed robber who also happens to be Linda's lover. Within hours, Ronnie Cook is dead. 2 bullets. 1 to the arm. 1 to the head. He dies kneeling on Linda Calvey's floor. Daniel Reece becomes Britain's most paradoxical prisoner. 2 years earlier, he'd been celebrated as a hero, the informant who turned in serial rapist David Lashley, solving the brutal murder of 24-year-old Janie Shepherd. Police praised him. Prison staff quietly respected him. He'd broken the sacred code, never grass, but for the right reasons. To protect women. To bring a monster to justice. But here's what the authorities didn't publicize: Daniel Reece himself was serving time for rape, buggery, and false imprisonment. The man who informed on a rapist was a rapist. The man who helped solve a murder was about to commit one. And the criminal underworld that feared him as an enforcer was about to learn he'd killed one of their own, for a woman, for money, for reasons that violated every principle of Gangland honor. This is the story of Daniel Reece. The enforcer. The informant. The predator. The hitman. A man whose capacity for violence, influence within the prison system, and criminal legacy marked him out as uniquely dangerous in modern British criminal history. Before we examine the shocking double life of the man the underworld feared, subscribe to this channel right now. We document Britain's deadliest prisoners, the ones who hid monsters behind reputations. Hit that button. This is Daniel Reece's real story. To understand Daniel Reece, you have to understand the London underworld of the 1970s and 1980s. A world where the Cray twins were legends. Where Frankie Fraser was royalty. Where armed robbery wasn't just crime, it was profession. This was the world of blaggers, professional thieves who hit security vans, banks, post offices with military precision. Men who went to prison as badges of honor, served time, came out, did it again. The code was simple: never grass. Take your punishment. Protect your own. Handle disputes internally. Never involve police. And absolutely never kill over a woman or money owed between criminals; those were personal matters, beneath the dignity of professional criminals. Daniel Reece moved through this world as an enforcer. When you needed someone hurt, intimidated, or made to disappear, you called Reece. He was physically imposing, over 6 feet, heavily muscled from years of bodybuilding, with a reputation for explosive, unpredictable violence. He didn't just threaten. He delivered. And people knew it. By the mid-1980s, Reece was known across London's criminal networks. Armed robberies. Violent enforcement. Debt collection with extreme prejudice. He was the man you hired when you wanted fear, not just compliance. But beneath this criminal resume lay something darker. Something the underworld either didn't know or chose to ignore. Because in 1985 to 1986, Daniel Reece was charged and convicted of rape, buggery, and false imprisonment. The National Archives confirm it: Daniel Michael Reece, sexual offenses, sentenced to substantial prison time. The feared enforcer was a sexual predator. The man criminals trusted to handle violence was using that violence in the most depraved ways. But in prison, Reece didn't broadcast his charges. He let people assume he was inside for robbery, for violence against criminals, for professional crimes. And his physical presence, his reputation, his connections kept most questions unasked. The details of Daniel Reece's sexual offenses remained sealed in court archives, protected by victim privacy laws and the passage of time. But the charges tell the story: rape, buggery, false imprisonment. These aren't crimes of opportunity. They're crimes of prolonged control. Of physical domination. Of a predator who used his size, strength, and capacity for violence not against fellow criminals who could fight back, but against vulnerable victims who couldn't. False imprisonment means holding someone against their will. In combination with rape and buggery, it paints a horrifying picture: victims trapped, unable to escape, subjected to hours or days of sexual violence. This wasn't a bar fight. This wasn't criminal-on-criminal violence. This was predation in its purest, most cowardly form. The 1985 to 1986 timeframe places these crimes at the height of Reece's criminal career. He was operating as an enforcer, building reputation in the underworld, likely earning substantial money from robbery and intimidation work. And simultaneously, he was targeting innocent victims for sexual violence. The dichotomy is chilling: respected by criminals, feared by associates, while secretly being the exact type of predator that even hardened criminals despise. In British prisons, there's a rigid hierarchy. At the top, armed robbers, professional criminals, those who lived by the code. At the bottom, sex offenders, child abusers, rapists. They're called nonces, bacons, targeted for violence, forced into protective custody. The hypocrisy is stunning: murderers judging rapists, armed robbers attacking child abusers, but the hierarchy is real and brutal. Daniel Reece should have been at the bottom. Instead, his reputation as an enforcer, his physical power, and his ability to keep his charges quiet allowed him to operate in the middle tiers, mixing with professional criminals who either didn't know or didn't care what he'd really done. And that ability to hide in plain sight would serve him well in the years to come. Linda Calvey was born Linda Welford in Ilford, Essex, April 8, 1948. Post-war East End London, where poverty bred criminality and criminality bred respect. At age 12, she saw a red Rolls-Royce and told her family, "One day I'm going to have one of those and a fur coat." She meant it. At 19, she met Reggie Cray. He kissed her hand like a proper gent. She was hooked on Gangland glamour. She married her first husband, Mickey Calvey, in the 1970s. Mickey was a professional armed robber, careful, successful, respected. They lived well. Nice home. Money. Status. Then December 9, 1978, changed everything. Mickey and his crew hit a supermarket in Eltham, South London. Armed with shotguns, they grabbed £10,000 in cash. But flying squad detectives were waiting. As Mickey ran to the getaway car, Detective Constable Peter Finch aimed his rifle. One shot. Mickey Calvey dropped dead. Linda was 30 years old, widowed, with 2 young sons. She could have walked away from crime. Instead, she went deeper. She started wearing black exclusively, mourning clothes that became her trademark. The East End christened her the Black Widow. And she embraced it. She began planning and executing her own armed robberies. Banks. Post offices. Security vans. She was good at it. Fearless. Calculated. And she surrounded herself with dangerous men. One was Ronnie Cook, Mickey's former associate. He'd been on the Eltham job, escaped arrest, but was later caught for other robberies and sentenced to 16 years. While Cook served his time, Linda visited regularly. They became lovers. She promised to wait for him. But Ronnie Cook was controlling, allegedly abusive, and by the late 1980s, Linda wanted out. There was just one problem: Ronnie knew too much. About her crimes. About her money. About her secrets. Then Linda met Daniel Reece. And everything accelerated toward murder. Prison, late 1980s. The Sawmill Workshop. Daniel Reece and David Lashley work side by side, both bodybuilders, both serving long sentences. Lashley is inside for rape and attempted murder, brutal attacks on women across West London that earned him the nickname Beast of Shepherd's Bush. But Lashley is powerful, dangerous, someone even hardened criminals avoid confronting directly. Reece befriends him. They train together in the prison gym. Hours of spotting each other on bench press, sharing bodybuilding knowledge, building trust. Then one day in 1988, Lashley reads a newspaper article about a black man sentenced to prison for rape. And Lashley says something chilling: he should have killed her. If I had killed that bitch who put me in here like I did the other, I wouldn't be here now. Then Lashley describes a murder. February 11, 1986. A 24-year-old art student named Janie Shepherd. Her white minicar with the "For Sale" sign in the back window, parked in Ladbroke Grove. The butcher's knife Lashley used to threaten her, cutting the car roof to demonstrate its sharpness. Forcing her into the passenger seat. Driving to an isolated location. Ripping her clothes with the knife. Raping her brutally. Forcing her to say she was enjoying it. Then the killing, Lashley demonstrates, holding the back of an imaginary neck with his left hand while shoving his massive right fist down an imaginary throat, suffocating Janie Shepherd with brute force. Daniel Reece listens to every detail. And makes a decision. He goes to a prison officer. "It's for the safety of white women in the country," he says. "A monster like Lashley should never be released." The information reaches Metropolitan Police. Lashley's description matches pathology reports perfectly, details unknown to the public. The case reopens. When Lashley walks free on February 7, 1989, detectives arrest him 30 seconds later. He's eventually convicted of Janie Shepherd's murder and given a whole-life tariff. He'll die in prison. Daniel Reece becomes a hero. The informant who broke the code for the right reasons. Who brought a monster to justice. But what the authorities didn't emphasize, Reece himself was serving time for rape and sexual violence. The informant was a predator turning in another predator. And within 2 years, he'd be a murderer. Daniel Reece is still in prison when tragedy strikes his family. His son is killed in a traffic accident. Reece is devastated, grieving, isolated behind bars. Brian Thorogood, a friend of Ronnie Cook, knows Linda Calvey has connections to serious criminals. He introduces her to Reece, thinking perhaps she can offer support, contacts, or just a sympathetic ear from someone connected to the underworld. The introduction creates a deadly triangle. Linda is still technically with Ronnie Cook, who's serving his 16-year sentence at Maidstone Prison. She visits regularly, maintains the relationship, lets him believe she's waiting faithfully. But Linda has grown tired of Cook. He's controlling. Allegedly abusive during visits. And crucially, Cook knows about money Linda earned from robberies, money she doesn't want to share when he's released. Linda and Daniel Reece begin an affair. Prison visits. Letters. Phone calls. Reece is everything Cook isn't: younger, physically powerful, still feared in criminal circles despite incarceration. Linda tells Reece about Cook. About the control. About the money. About how Cook's impending release threatens everything. Then Brian Thorogood, the man who introduced them, also becomes Linda's lover. Now there are 3, Linda, Reece, and Thorogood. All connected. All complicit. And all agreeing on one thing: Ronnie Cook has to die. The plan forms slowly. Cook is nearing the end of his sentence. He's granted day release, supervised trips outside prison to help transition back to society. One of those day releases will be his last. Linda will lure him to her East London home. Reece will be waiting. And Cook will never see his full release date. But there's one problem: Daniel Reece is still in prison. He can't pull the trigger himself. So the plan adapts. Brian Thorogood will do the shooting. And Daniel Reece will mastermind the hit from behind bars. The enforcer becomes the contractor. The feared hitman orders a murder he can't personally commit. November 1990. The plan is ready. And Ronnie Cook is walking toward his execution. November 1990. Ronnie Cook is granted day release from prison Maidstone. After 16 years inside, he's weeks away from freedom. He heads to Linda Calvey's home in East London, the woman he loves, the woman he believes is waiting for him, the woman who's been planning his death. Linda greets him warmly. They talk. Drink. The atmosphere seems normal. Cook has no idea Brian Thorogood is in the house. No idea Thorogood is armed. No idea this is his final day. Then it happens. Thorogood emerges with a gun. The first shot hits Cook in the arm, painful but not fatal. Cook drops to his knees, shocked, bleeding, confused. Why is this happening? What did he do? He looks at Linda for explanation, for mercy, for intervention. Linda Calvey watches. Does nothing. The second shot hits Ronnie Cook in the head. He dies kneeling on Linda's floor, executed in the home of the woman he loved. The murder is quick, brutal, efficient. No witnesses. No evidence trail. Clean. Except it's not clean. Because Ronnie Cook was on day release from prison. When he doesn't return, alarms sound immediately. Prison authorities notify police. Cook's body is discovered quickly. And Linda Calvey, Brian Thorogood, and Daniel Reece, still in prison but implicated through letters and phone records, are arrested for murder. The Black Widow finally made a fatal mistake. And the enforcer who'd been celebrated for informing on a murderer was now charged with ordering one. Police move quickly. Brian Thorogood is arrested at the scene, gun residue on his hands, no alibi, clearly the shooter. Linda Calvey is arrested hours later, her home now a crime scene, blood evidence everywhere. And Daniel Reece, still in prison, is charged as the mastermind. The evidence is overwhelming. Letters between Reece and Linda discussing the problem of Ronnie Cook. Phone records showing calls coordinating the day release timing. Witness statements from other inmates who heard Reece talking about sorting out Linda's boyfriend. And crucially, testimony from Frankie Fraser, legendary gangster whose word carried weight. Fraser testified that Linda Calvey told him she killed Cook because he would have discovered she'd spent his money. It wasn't about abuse. Wasn't about fear. Was about greed. Pure, simple greed. Cook had money from robberies before his arrest. Linda spent it during his 16 years inside. When he got out, he'd want accounting. So she had him killed. The charges are filed: murder for Linda Calvey and Brian Thorogood as principals, conspiracy to murder and procurement of murder for Daniel Reece. All three face life sentences. But Reece faces something worse, the complete destruction of his carefully constructed reputation. The enforcer revealed not just as hitman, but as predator, informant, and now murderer of a fellow criminal over a woman and money. Every code violated. Every principle broken. The underworld that once feared Daniel Reece now despised him. The trial is sensational. The Black Widow finally in the dock. Newspapers cover every detail. Linda denies everything: she wasn't there, didn't plan it, didn't know Thorogood would shoot Cook. She portrays herself as victim, claims Cook was abusive, suggests she feared for her life. The jury doesn't believe her. Brian Thorogood admits shooting Cook but claims Linda manipulated him, promised him money and relationship, made him believe it was necessary. He's the triggerman but argues he was used. Daniel Reece, appearing from prison via video link, maintains he had nothing to do with it. The letters were misunderstood. The phone calls were innocent. He barely knew Cook. But prosecutors present evidence showing Reece and Linda's affair, their discussions about Cook as a problem, and Reece's reputation as enforcer making him logical mastermind. Frankie Fraser's testimony is devastating. When a man of Fraser's stature, someone who knew the craze, who'd done decades inside, who commanded underworld respect, says Linda Calvey admitted to murder for money, juries listen. The verdicts, guilty. All three. Linda Calvey, life sentence, minimum 18 years. Brian Thorogood, life sentence. Daniel Reece, additional life sentence on top of his existing sentence for sexual offenses, meaning he'll likely die in prison. The Black Widow finally caught. The enforcer finally stopped. And Ronnie Cook, dead at the threshold of freedom, becomes another casualty of the London underworld's violence. Daniel Reece returns to prison not as feared enforcer but as marked man. Word spreads quickly, he informed on David Lashley, violated the code. He killed Ronnie Cook over a woman, violated Gangland principles. And worst of all, he's a convicted rapist hiding behind tough guy reputation. In British prisons, this combination is deadly. Informants are targeted. Sex offenders are brutalized. Men who kill over women rather than criminal business are seen as weak. Reece has multiple targets on his back. But Reece survives through the same tools that made him dangerous outside, physical power and capacity for violence. He's still a bodybuilder, still imposing, still willing to fight. And crucially, he aligns himself with other long-term prisoners who prioritize stability over revenge. Men serving life sentences who don't want additional charges, who just want to do their time quietly. Reece also benefits from the compartmentalization of the British prison system. Not everyone knows everyone's charges. Information travels slowly. And Reece's ability to present himself as professional criminal rather than sexual predator helps him avoid the worst violence that nonces typically face. But his reputation is destroyed. The enforcer who once commanded respect now commands only wary distance. He's dangerous, but not respected. Feared, but not honored. He exists in prison limbo, too violent to be vulnerable, too tainted to be accepted. And he'll likely die there. Because Daniel Reece's sentences, the original sexual offenses term plus life for murder, mean he's never leaving custody. Prison Durham. Despite being incarcerated for murdering her boyfriend, Linda Calvey marries Daniel Reece in prison ceremony. The Black Widow and the enforcer, united behind bars in what might be Britain's most toxic romance. The marriage shocks observers. Why would Linda marry the man who helped orchestrate Ronnie Cook's murder, the crime that put her away for life? Some suggest it's genuine affection, twisted, criminal affection, but real. Others suggest it's strategy, maintaining alliance with dangerous man who can offer protection in prison system. Still others suggest it's pure narcissism, Linda's need to control and manipulate extending even into incarceration. The marriage lasts on paper but means little practically. They're in separate prisons, different genders, limited contact. But symbolically it represents something profound, two of Britain's most dangerous criminals bound together, their criminal partnership formalized even as they serve life sentences. Linda would eventually be released in 2008 after 18 years, having served her minimum tariff. She'd go on to deny her guilt repeatedly, change her story, write books, give interviews. She'd become minor celebrity, the glamorous gangster's widow, the Black Widow, the woman who ran with the craze. But Daniel Reece remains in prison. Decades later. Still serving time for sexual offenses and murder. The marriage dissolved in meaning if not in paperwork. And Reece fades from public consciousness, remembered only as footnote in Linda Calvey's lurid story. We're halfway through the shocking story of Daniel Reece, enforcer, informant, rapist, murderer. The man who helped solve a murder then committed one. Comment below, was Reece's informing on Lashley genuine justice, or just one predator betraying another? Hit that like button and let's continue examining how this case exposed the hypocrisy of the criminal code. Daniel Reece's case exposes fundamental hypocrisy in British criminal culture. The code supposedly governs underworld behavior, never grass, handle your business, keep it between criminals, never involve innocents. But Reece violates every principle and gets away with it until murder. He's rapist targeting innocent victims, violates code that says innocents are off limits. He's informant who grasses on Lashley, violates sacred prohibition against informing. He's hitman who kills over woman and money, violates principle that criminal disputes should be handled professionally. Yet he maintains reputation as enforcer, commands fear, operates effectively in criminal world for years. Why? Because the code is selective fiction. Criminals invoke it when convenient, ignore it when profitable. Frankie Fraser and the Krays built reputations on never grass, while informants and police corruption riddled their organizations. Armed robbers claimed honor, while beating, stealing from, and killing each other over money and ego. The supposed prohibition against harming innocents, ignored constantly through collateral damage, witness intimidation, family threats. Reece understood this hypocrisy and exploited it. He knew that physical power, reputation for violence, and useful connections mattered more than abstract principles. He knew that in prison and underworld, strength trumps morality. And he was right, until he wasn't. The Ronnie Cook murder finally crossed a line even the flexible criminal code couldn't bend around. Not because murder was wrong, criminals murder each other constantly. But because the murder was so transparently about greed and romantic betrayal, so clearly violated even the pretense of professionalism, that it disgusted even hardened criminals. Daniel Reece's fall proves the code exists not as genuine moral framework but as convenient mythology. And when mythology meets reality, mythology loses. Lost in Daniel Reece's criminal narrative are his victims. The people he raped, falsely imprisoned, terrorized in the 1980s. Their identities protected by law, their stories sealed in archives, their suffering reduced to legal charges in National Archives database. Who were they? How did Reece target them? How did they survive or not survive the trauma? What happened to their lives after? These questions remain unanswered, the victims' voices silenced by time and legal protection. We know from the charges that Reece used physical domination and false imprisonment, meaning prolonged captivity, extended sexual violence, calculated terror. We know from his criminal profile that he was capable of extreme violence and manipulation. We know from his later willingness to commit murder that human life meant little to him. But the victims themselves remain shadows. And that invisibility is tragedy compounded. Daniel Reece gets documentary treatment, analysis, examination. His victims get anonymity and silence. The system that failed to stop him before his crimes, that allowed him to hide predatory nature behind enforcer reputation, continues failing by erasing victim testimony from historical record. Janie Shepherd got justice because Reece informed. But Reece's own victims never got courtroom vindication, public acknowledgement, or societal reckoning with how a known predator operated freely for years. Their justice was private, limited, incomplete. Daniel Reece represents a unique category in British criminal history, the enforcer predator. A man whose capacity for violence served both criminal enterprises and personal depravity. Who could be professional hitman one moment, sexual predator the next? Who could inform on a murderer while being rapist himself? Who could order execution from prison cell while serving time for earlier horrors? He's not Charles Bronson, the celebrity prisoner whose violence is performative, theatrical, designed for attention. He's not the Krays, Gangland royalty whose mythology obscures their brutality. He's not even typical sex offender who relies on stealth and vulnerability. Reece is hybrid monster, the predator who weaponized criminal reputation to avoid accountability for sexual crimes, then weaponized informant status to appear redeemable, then committed murder that exposed everything. He's dangerous not despite his contradictions, but because of them. As of available records, Daniel Reece remains imprisoned decades after the Ronnie Cook murder. He's elderly now, his bodybuilder physique likely diminished by age and incarceration, his reputation reduced to cautionary tale. He'll almost certainly die in custody, the original sexual offenses sentence plus life for murder guarantee it. Linda Calvey was released in 2008, wrote books, gave interviews, maintained innocence. Brian Thorogood served his sentence. Ronnie Cook remains dead, his murder still debated in true crime circles. David Lashley died in prison serving whole life tariff for Janie Shepherd's murder. Daniel Reece's sexual assault victims remain anonymous, their stories untold. Daniel Reece, enforcer, rapist, informant, murderer. A man who violated every code while hiding behind criminal reputation. 38 years behind bars and counting. If this examination of Britain's deadliest prisoners shocked you, subscribe for more documentaries exposing the truth behind criminal mythology. Comment, does informing on one predator excuse being another? Should Reece have gotten credit for the Lashley information given his own crimes? Thanks for watching Britain's Deadliest Prisoners, where we examine the criminals the system tried to forget.